The purpose of this video is, as I'm going through this mini series till the end of the year, is to talk about all the tech that I took to Scotland, what was my experience with the tech that I used, and would I recommend it to anybody trying to travel on a run and gun situation where they have minimal time to take advantage of documenting what they see before moving on to the next place, and just the efficiency of the tech that I used. The two pieces of tech that I'm talking about in this video is the Canon R8 as well as the DJI Air 3. I've talked at length about these, and I'll link the videos where I talk about them down below in the description. But first I want to talk about what was my experience utilizing these pieces of tech in another country with different temperatures, different atmospheres, and just different environments than what I'm currently used to living in Georgia in the United States. So let's start with the Canon R8. I released a video last year that I still stand by. There are a lot of things that I liked and I do not like about this camera, and one reason why it's a really great camera to start off with if you're getting into a mirrorless camera lineup, and maybe why you should think about upgrading soon after you get this. Aside from the negatives that I talked about in my review last year for this, I actually did not experience a lot of those that I did in Scotland, namely overheating. So there were a lot of times where I did shoot in 60 frames per second, and in my review video I talked about how detrimental that is to a camera of this size. Over there was absolutely no overheating, and it was largely in part due to the cold weather. We were out there for 12 days, so there were about 2 or 3 days where it was actually warm. I worked my way around that, especially if I was running the camera continuously, but for the most part, because of the cold weather, I never really ran into the overheating issue, especially shooting between 30 and 60 FPS. And kind of how I mentioned in my 70 to 200 millimeter review from a couple of weeks ago, this camera actually paired up really well with the 70 to 200. The 70 to 200 millimeter lens is already a super heavy one as it is, so pairing it up with a lightweight camera like the Canon R8 kind of offsetted that a little bit. Now the lens was still heavy, and I'll talk at length in a future video coming up about some accessories that I actually attached to it to alleviate a little bit more of the weight. But the weight itself was definitely a plus over there, because aside from all the running and gunning shooting that I was doing and how easy that was to do that, it just wasn't as heavy paired with that lens. The battery situation, still a horrible thing, nothing I can ever get away with. If you know what I'm talking about, go watch that review video where I talk about, or any review video, really how bad the LPE17 batteries for the Canon R8 are. When this camera first came out, most people were wondering, well, why in the world is it so much worse than the Canon RP? And that's because just this camera is actually shooting on a wider dynamic range. So it's using a lot more power to pump out a better image. And as a result, you get the overheating issue as well as the terrible battery situation. In Scotland, I was continuously cycling through 4 batteries. I continuously had to charge them every single night. There was maybe one day where I just ran out and I still had maybe 4 or 5 hours left in the day, and I had to run over to a hotel, plug it in, charge it, rest for a little bit, and then go back out. But for the most part, I got by, and it's not a situation I want to find myself in because just the battery rating is bad on this one. All right, so that was my experience with the Canon R8. Again, if you want a lot more details, you can go check out my full review on this one. The next piece of tech that I have really hammered on this channel, most recently too, with my comparison between this one and the latest model, is the DJI Air 3. However, this one I'm going to talk about how it held up in Scotland particularly. I got all the range I needed out of this and more. I'm not going to complain about that. I went, there were times where I had the ability to go out a couple of miles out to get me stuff, to get me footage that I could not walk there, or it would have just taken me too much time out of my day to go and get. So that is a huge plus, especially because in the terrain of Scotland, you're seeing a lot more openness. There's not a lot of tree covers. There's not a lot of things that would hinder you aside. I mean, unless you go over the side of a cliff or, you know, the coastline. The weight of it was also perfect. There's a lot of wind in Scotland. There were a lot of times where there's actually one time when I'm flying around this castle called Ilion Donan. I may be mispronouncing that at all, but it's on a lake and the breeze was just insane. I probably went maybe 200 or 300 feet out before I realized I should not fly this thing because the wind was just crazy. But yet the footage came back and I was very shocked because you can't even tell it was that crazy. So the weight of this definitely held up in Scotland, where the wind was just crazy and probably would have blown out a mini series drone out of the air. The 24-70, perfect camera, perfect for landscape. 24 giving me the wide range, the 70 giving me more close details of wildlife. If I wanted just compression between objects and mountains, trees, whatever it is, they just worked really well in that environment, especially because of the vastness of Scotland that allows you to play around with different features of the land. Speaking of weather though, I will say I did fly it many times in the rain. I'm not going to recommend doing this. Do this at your own risk if you need to. There were times where I needed to get certain shots. I wanted to get certain shots and rain just came in out of nowhere and I didn't have the time to wait around for it. I flew it in, moderately to sort of heavy rain. I did have to wipe it down when I came back, put it in front of a heater, just dry it up, but it held up pretty well under rain. And even the camera, it was kind of hard to capture the water, so it made it look like it was just a hazy afternoon. But I was very surprised flying it in the rain that it held up and came back. And it's been 2 months, about a month and a half since then, and no issues, no shortages. There's nothing going on with the camera, so it held up. Now we're gonna keep this video brief because, as I keep saying, I have gone into great depth and effort to make reviews on these two products by themselves, so feel free to check them out if you'd like. We're carrying along on our little mini series here, talking about all the tech that I took over to Scotland and if I would recommend it or not on trips like that, where you're just running around trying to get everything you possibly can with the best quality you can and the most minimal setup. If that helped, drop a like on this video. Let me know in the comment section what you thought. But other than that, we're gonna see you guys in the next video.